Is there is there too much background noise for you, or does it sound okay?
No, you're doing just fine.
Okay.
Welcome to Spotlight on the Intelligence Music. I have Oatmello with me here. How are you doing today, bud?
I'm doing great. I'm glad
Good.
to be here.
I brought you on to figure out a little bit more about what your musical journey has been like, what it is you're about, what you like to do. So I'm going to start with real general questions and let you take it any way you like. Who are you?
Who am I? Well, I am a musician who is also so I'm really interested in music, and particularly I started out as a piano player. So when I was a kid, I basically took piano lessons. My parents forced me to take piano lessons, so I was classically trained for a while. Um, and I got pretty sick of that because I felt like, honestly, I felt like after a while I was a player piano. Like I could put some of sheet music in front of me, I could play like almost anything. But then when I sat down to play with friends of mine, like who were in bands and things like that, it's like I couldn't jam at all. Like I had no idea how to play any sort of music that was in myself or coming from my own head. And so it just incredibly frustrated me. And I basically just stopped making any sort of music or playing any sort of music for quite some time. And then I came back to it with basically making beats. I just like I got a simple like keyboard and a sampler, and started making like terrible stuff, but it was like that was the start of my journey right there. Um, and honestly, whereas I still feel like I've returned to being able to play the piano, and I love playing like solo improv piano. And I have actually an alternative alias, Late Era, which is an ambient alias and also kind of like a neoclassical project, which at times has been actually quite a bit more successful than Oatmello. I mean, there kind of been like these two side projects I've had, um, which is more piano focused, but I think combining the two of them, combining the piano and the beats together, is really at the heart of the Oatmello project itself. And yeah, I mean, there was a time in my life when I remember making music in my basement. Just actually, I was producing for some rappers at that time, and I just remember thinking, like, this is something I can do for like the rest of my life. Like, I'm totally satisfied. Just like, this is it. I can do this until I die. And like, I'm actually just really grateful that I have been able to make it my full-time living and my full-time career. So I'm really happy about that.
Okay, lots to unpack there. You gave me a ton of great stuff to work with. So I'm gonna hit it line by line. Couple of notes I had as you were running through it, right? So I just wanted to say first to relate to you, I understand what you're talking about coming from. I was classically trained on guitar, went to teach guitar for about a decade, and it's sort of exactly like what you said. I could reproduce any commercial song, even ones that you wouldn't expect to be played on guitar, but the jamming ability, the creativity, the improv just wasn't there. You find it necessary to do something a little bit more avant-garde to express yourself. I absolutely get it. So you said you moved on to making beats, and I'm curious to know what kind of DAW, keyboard, sampler, what kind of equipment were you working with?
So I've kind of gone back and forth between using Cubase and using Logic. Um, I feel like I use Logic now pretty much exclusively. I've tried to get into using Ableton before. I have no doubt that Ableton will be like an amazing DAW. There's a lot of features about it that are just awesome, but at this point I know Logic like so well, and I can move so quickly in it. Like I can just get the ideas out of my head so fast that it's just really hard for me to switch to anything else. Um, but yeah, Logic is like my primary DAW that I use. And then in terms of stuff I use, like I really like. I mean, I have like just a this point I have like a big. I usually just sample inside the computer itself, and I have a pretty minimal setup. So I have a complete uh, S88 MK2 is what it's called, like the big 88-inch weighted Native Instruments keyboard. I got a microphone. I got a nice pair of headphones. I got audio interface. I got some nice monitors just so I can hear things clearly in the studio. I also have a Rolly C-board, and I have a handful of guitars. Like I've got some D'Angelo's, like a nice hollow body D'Angelo. I got a Fender. I got a American Fender P bass that I use for most of my bass stuff. So guitar has been a great addition. I actually only like maybe a year or two ago just started to pick up guitar, and it always seems super intimidating to me. But I think from a producer standpoint, once you know what you want in your ear, and you're not like just randomly jamming and you're like, I want like this chord and then I want like this solo, it's actually not that hard to figure it out. So I've been like really pleasantly surprised with like starting to play guitar and work guitar into my productions. But yeah, that's like basically my setup. I mean, I used to have a lot more external gear. I used to have like external compressors and different like preamps, and I had like a SP404 and a 303, and I had a bunch of like just like classic gear. But I've actually just found that working in the box right now is super fast for me, and I am more into being able to express myself really quickly than I am into the subtleties of different outboard gear at this point. So yeah, that's primarily what I'm using these days. Software side, on the software side, I'm kind of like a plugin junkie. Like I have like so many plugins and different like contact instruments and stuff like that. And I have a little bit of a problem, honestly. Like I think at last count, I have maybe like, I can't remember how many, but I think I have about like 800 plugins or something like that. So I got a lot of them.
Great feedback. So some commentary on that. I had the opportunity to use Cubase early on in my journey, went straight over my head, like not a chance. I was not prepared. Followed that up with Ableton, of all things, which was equally intimidating, but it has such a steep learning curve to it. I'd say it took me probably the better part of 4 years to even become competent. Here I am 10 years later, like still not knowing what half of the functions do. Ableton is absolutely worth it, but I can understand why you would stick to something that lets you do the necessary effectively and quickly. I've always been jealous of Logic users because that for me the major barrier is using a Mac. Can you believe that it's 2024 and I don't know how to use Apple products?
Yeah, luckily it's pretty simple. I mean, and it's funny too because using stuff is hard, and part of it I think is the way, like, I don't know if you're like me, but I don't like to learn things in really the most like efficient way. So I mean, I actually read the Logic manual not that long ago, and it was like completely blowing my mind. Like the stuff I was learning, I'm just like, oh my God, I've never like read the manual before. And there's like so much stuff in here to know how to use. I'm sure like maybe if I really wanted to dig into Ableton, I took that approach and just read the manual and did a bunch of online tutorials that would go quickly, but that's just not the way I like to learn things. And more so just like muck about and like see what happens,
I absolutely relate. It's the stereotypical male impulse to not read the instructions and just mess around and find out. I get it.
Yeah.
I'm a fan of your minimalist setup. I do something similar myself. Like you said, like I run mostly from computer with the external audio interface if I need to incorporate some vocals and guitar. But like I like to like you said, hoard all my plugins in software form. I've seen you ever heard of Eurorack?
Yeah.
Okay, my buddy has like clinical gas gear acquisition syndrome, and I look at all of his stuff and I get option paralysis. I'm like, how the hell would you even begin to know what all of these do? And they're like a good like $200-$400 per unit. So he's sank like easily 10 grand into this Eurorack, and I'm just like, buddy, you can do all of this with VSTs.
Yeah, you're like, you could do all this with Serum, no problem. I think what you're saying is a really interesting and important point. I think that like I have a lot of options too, but when I think about creativity, I think a key part about creativity and having like a sound and like creating a sound, whether it's whether it's a sound for yourself as an artist or even for a project or something like that, it really is like limiting your options is one of the most important, like ways to like get there. And this is like kind of more philosophical, but I think about like sound with like no limitations. Like if you have no limitations on sound at all, like what do you have? You have basically like white noise, right? That's like completely on one side of the spectrum. It would just be like every possible like sonic option like happening at the same time. So just like in and of itself, you're whittling that down into, you're making all sorts of decisions. And then you have like artists that I think are really well defined and people love their sound. A lot of times it's because their sound has a very limited palette and a very limited number of options. You know, maybe they're using a certain set of guitar pedals every time, and that's how they get their guitar sound. And they're using like a certain bass guitar, a certain bass amp, and they're using this drum set, this drum kit, these drum miking techniques, whatever it is. I think those things can really like help you define a sound that way, and then can kind of go deeper into it, yeah, that's the end of my train of thought there.
No, I like it. I think absolutely to provide some sort of pseudo confines, to put yourself in a box, helps creativity thrive. Like I believe in exactly what you're saying, that limitations inspire workarounds, but if there's always all the options all the time, it's very easy to get stuck and overwhelmed with just the sheer depth of things that you can do. I think that having go-to sounds is what creates a brand, right? Like a recognizable signature sound. And to pivot off that, I really latched on to something you said about getting the idea out fast in Logic. What's your creative process like, and how do you quote unquote get the idea out fast?
Yeah, so it changes over time. Like the process is not really static. I would say that I probably would make more music and be more successful if my product process was totally static, but also I would be probably bored, I think. But it's not a completely static process. And right now, what I say, like I'm doing like at the moment, just I'm working on a project right now, and what is my process for that project? So I start making kind of simple beat loops, start making simple beat loops till I have something that I feel like sounds pretty good. And I loop it up for like 5-6 minutes. So it just extends out on the timeline of the DAW, and then I just like let it run, and I'll pick a piano sound or a synth sound, and I'll just play on top of that for, it could be 30 seconds. It could be 15 minutes, could be 20 minutes, until I find something that I really like the emotion of it. I really like the feeling of it. I like the way it sounds. That could be a set of chords. It could be a melody. It could be a certain passage, whatever it is. Then I start usually building off that. That's the root, right? That's the root right now in my process, is to do that. And then I'll start building off of it. And maybe that's okay. I'll start adding in a bass line. I'll play a little bass line. Maybe I'll find some effects that go with it. Maybe I'll record a little vocal. Maybe I'll like dig around for a sample or something like that fits it. So I'll just start kind of building off of those pieces. And until I get like something a little bit more complete that I really like. And then I'll usually go into like an arrangement phase and start arranging it. I will say though that the best music I've made, and this is cool having this conversation because it's bringing it back to me, but the best music I've made by far came when my process was to actually start at the very beginning of the song and just like start and be like, what should the beginning of this song sound like? And then just like make that and make it perfect. And then like do the next part and be like, okay, like what's the next part? Like, what's it going to be? Is it going to be a little break? And then like do that until it's like just perfect. So never going backwards, just being like, it's done. Like I did this part. It's exactly right. Doing the next part. It's done. Next part. It's like done. One step at a time until like everything is perfect. But that's the way that has been most successful. That process is actually for me, but that's not the process I'm doing right now.
I love it. Would you believe I've never made a song from beginning to end like that? I have a very ADHD fueled process that involves lots of bouncing around. My heart aches for anybody who has ever wanted to watch me produce because it must be a nightmare to look at. So I really like this idea of making a piece, committing to it, and just moving on from there because it must be so much more time efficient than skipping to the middle, changing one thing, skipping to the end, changing one thing, bouncing all over the place.
Well, it's
Uh,
just, I don't know, I I didn't do it. I didn't make music this way because of this interview, but I read it. I listened to an interview once with Tennyson. Do you know Tennyson?
oh yeah,
Yeah, kind of a classic, kind of, I don't know, just producer. And he was saying in this interview that his process actually is that he's broken it down as that to continue his career how he wants to, he needs to release X amount of music every year. Like I don't remember what it was, but maybe he's like, I need to release like 40 minutes of music every year or something like that. And then he breaks it down to if he's working, 5 days a week, that every day, he needs to just produce, I think in this interview, he said it was something like 15 seconds of music. And so he'll go into the studio and he'll just be like, I'm making like the next 15 seconds, and those 15 seconds are just going to be like perfect when I'm done today. And I'm not going to go beyond that. I'm not going to like lay out like 2, 5, 6, 7 minutes of stuff. He's like, I'm going to make 15 seconds that when I'm done with today, I'm like, this 15 seconds is freaking incredible. And I can 100% stand behind it, and then just like step and repeat that over and over again, which also is kind of a wild, like, what do you call it? Like almost like extreme version of that, like philosophy or
definitely
that
the
method,
focus that must take to be able to zero in on just that 15 seconds. I envy the dude his cognitive focus powers.
Yeah.
If you allow me, I wanted to pivot to something you said earlier about late era versus Oatmello. So it sounds like you are running music back from two different artist names. Oatmello on behalf of this interview, but you said late era is doing well as well. So I'm hearing lo-fi on one side and ambient neoclassical on the other, and I'm curious which how did each one come about? What was the reason for the separation of the two brands? And how do you feel like that has affected your music?
Yeah. So I actually have a couple other aliases too, but getting into the separation, sometimes I just feel like I felt like I just wanted to make some pure ambient stuff that was purely, yeah, ambient neoclassical type of stuff that explored that feeling. Because I think that the feeling of, there's an emotion maybe to the Oatmello music that is kind of consistent, but I wanted to explore some different emotions and just a different feeling and some pure ambient stuff that I just don't think fits in with the Oatmello like sound. And so yeah, just start a different alias to do that. Basically, that's the whole reason. There's not really a deeper rationale than that.
Did you find it was difficult to get a new brand started when you had already invested so much into Oatmello or whatever alias you were using before? Or is it as simple as just like, oh, new emotion, new artist?
I mean, there's the marketing side of it, and honestly, like a late era, I haven't been putting much attention to in the last couple of years. It's kind of fallen off a little bit in terms of the care and like the energy I put into it. But late era, it was surprisingly just the music like really resonated with people. And this kind of sounds cliche. This maybe sounds really cliche, but like when I started that project, I took a trip to Palm Springs actually, and I rented a house and was just in like the desert for like a couple months and made this like ambient album like the whole time there. And I it turned out it did really well. Like did better than I would have expected. Than my expectations would have been for it at all. And um, yeah, it's been really fun. So I've been doing some of that stuff, and I hope to get back into the ambient world a little bit more. But I've been really focusing on Oatmello the last couple of years. But I hope to make some more ambient music soon. And I actually kind of veering with Oatmello. I'm starting to kind of veer into just a little bit broader, like variety of tempos too, which I think is interesting. Like I have a new album coming out, Imperfections 3, actually, which will be coming out over the next couple months. And it includes everything from kind of really slow, like sleepy type lo-fi stuff to more jazz hop type stuff. So then it goes into stuff that's kind of like housey type music, you know, and kind of rides these waves of tempos. And then it even ends with a 12-minute long progressive lo-fi track that has like vocals. So, I mean, it's really all over the place, kind of trying some new things. And I'm happy about that because I feel like lo-fi is a genre in general right now. And I don't know if your podcast is like lo-fi focused or if it's just like music in general, you know, but I feel like lo-fi music right now is in certain ways, like, um, there's a lot of it that's not taking any chances and it's not trying to do anything different. And it's just a lot of tracks coming out that have a quote unquote like the sound or something like that. That sounds a little bit starting to sound a little bit like stale to me, you know, and maybe it has been for a while. So I'm just trying to have fun, like seeing what other directions I can take it. If I can do some stuff that maybe sounds a little bit different, push it on the edges a little bit, incorporate some different influences, try some different things.
Definitely. So to wax poetic about lo-fi for a second, my mentor, the one who helped me learn Ableton and get started with my music, he has described a desire to make lo-fi before, but the way he described it was that as you described, safe lo-fi that doesn't take any chances has completely oversaturated the market, in his opinion. And I think that what I've experienced with artists that I follow is there has to be some form of progression and adaptation, right? It's like you can't do the exact same thing for 10 years on end without making some adjustments. So I love to see this idea of Oatmello having a signature sound and emotion that begins to branch out a little bit, take more chances. I'm a sucker for novelty, right? So I love to hear artists that are classically known. This is from the EDM side, but like say they're known for like rhythm dubstep that has a very rigid brand to it, and then bam, you know, next thing you know, they move into house, they move into drum and bass, they start pushing the envelope, taking that signature sound to different tempos and genres, and I'm like, this is what I came for. Like I like to see an artist grow, and it sounds like you're well on your way with this Imperfections 3 sort of movement into all these different explorations of ideas.
Well, I hope so, you know, and that's really cool. Yeah, it is great when you see artists do that, I think, and when you have favorite artists and they make something that's a little different. I have thought about this a fair amount, and I think that there's two sides to it. Like I can definitely like 100% appreciate what you're saying. I also feel like there's something to be said for people that don't, and they just like stick to the guns like really hard. Like a great example is, I mean, you look at like, for example, like people like blues artists and stuff like that, you know, it's like you've got guys who like spent like 60 years just like perfecting the craft and doing like the same song style basically, and just like getting it like better and better. You know, someone say like Mighty Waters or something like that. It's like he's been doing like the same thing for 50 or 60 years, but he's just been like kind of like, it's just been like he's just going like further into perfecting that sound. And I think that there's validity to both approaches. Like I think it is fun to explore new things, and it's also interesting just to be like a craftsman and be like, I'm not changing this. I'm going to like just continually to like make it better somehow, you know? So I think that there's a tension between those two things, at least for me. You know, part of me is like, should I just be like improving this and making it better? And then part of me is like, oh, like I have all these ideas. I want to try these new things and make it fun. But it's like at the end of the day, I think at least for me, I gotta just, you know, do stuff that makes me excited to sit down and make music, because if that's not happening, then I'm not making any music anyways. So yeah, I guess that's the primary consideration.
Definitely. I think you make some good points too, right? They say it takes what, like 10,000 hours to become a master at something. So if you're switching constantly, you become kind of a jack of all trades, master of none. I think there's something to be said for somebody who has a lane in which they are a master, who's not afraid to step into other ones, but always has that home base that they can come back to. You know what I mean? Like you may have established this very classic Oatmello sound, but then boom, you know, you take a trip to Palm Springs, you are inspired to do something completely different. That doesn't mean that you have to, move completely into ambient or do all new all the time, but rather that you're capable of doing something different to, like you said, stimulate the creative process and bounce right back to what you know and have mastered. Um, if you don't mind me changing the subject here, I'm curious. You mentioned the marketing side when it came to late era and how that one has been a little bit more underground, off the radar. I'm curious what you do in the way of marketing for other aliases. Like, what is your best marketed music, and how did you do it?
I mean, I never have been really aggressive with marketing. Um, and I feel like in a certain way, I kind of just got really lucky in terms of what I was able to just achieve music wise. You know, I basically just started making music that I thought was cool and posting it on SoundCloud. And then I started to connect and network with other artists on SoundCloud that I also thought their music was cool. And then my SoundCloud account started to become kind of popular. And then people started posting my videos. I noticed on YouTube, like people were making edits of my videos or putting like anime videos behind my music and posting it on YouTube. And those started to become popular. And then it started to get placed in Spotify playlists um, and also into Apple Music playlists and things like that. So it kind of just like proliferated and bounced from one platform to another. Honestly, like I'm not a marketing expert, and I would just say that like for me, I have just tried to be authentic into it because the whole reason I'm doing this is not really to make money. I mean, it is cool that I have been able to make some money, but it's not about making money. It's just the fact that I just really love doing this. And so I just try to stay true to that. And then hopefully other people can see that and resonate with it and see like that intention behind it. And that's really all I tried to do. I think now, like especially right now, I think that there is um, increasingly important to become like your own brand on like social media, basically utilizing the visual mediums like TikTok and Instagram Reels and things like that. And that presents its whole own set of challenges, you know, and I have a lot of feelings about that. Um, I think it's easy to get like sucked up in that too. And then all of a sudden, what are you doing creatively? You're creatively making like you're putting all your energy into how can I make amazing like 10 to 12-second reels, and you're not really thinking anymore how do I make really amazing songs. And I think that is tough too, you know, to strike that balance, because I don't think that many musicians don't want that to be their focus. Like it's like I think about that sometimes because I haven't really dived really hard into that social side of things, although I see like that's kind of like if I was really thinking about marketing, that's the way I should go. But a lot of times, you know, I think to myself, I'm like, well, I really didn't start doing this because I wanted to be an incredible like video editor and like make like really like engagement heavy video clips. Like that's not what I got into this to do. Um, but you know, I think there is a way to do that kind of stuff on your own terms and in a way that's creative and people enjoy. So maybe I just haven't discovered that yet, and I'm still kind of looking around for it or trying to figure out what that would be. But yeah, I mean, I guess like on the marketing side, I don't feel like I have any amazing wisdom to share with anyone. It's tough, you know. I think that being responsible for doing the marketing yourself is kind of like the bane of many artists these days, and I'm no different in that regard. I don't think.
That was a very honest and fulfilling answer, to be quite frank with you. I was going to say that, like, I'm immediately skeptical of anyone who considers themselves a marketing guru and an artist, because every artist I've talked to that makes quality music, like you described, good songs, has always had a very love hate, mostly hate relationship with the marketing side. I think it speaks to the quality of your work that it happened so organically for you. You know, the SoundCloud to YouTube to Spotify pipeline is real. Like, if it's good music, the people will find it, or at least that's the hope, right? I think that there's been a lot of throttling and bottlenecking of organic reach in favor of, like, these music companies wanting you to pay money for exposure, and it's become much more necessary nowadays to be both an artist and an influencer of types, just purely so you can serve as a living advertisement to your own craft. Because the more people who pick up music creation, the more we contribute to this pool of, like, all of these crabs in a bucket desperate to get noticed, right? I think that what you stumbled across, or I guess rather just what happened for you naturally, was just making good music and having people appreciate it. And I think artists nowadays are so starved for that vehicle of marketing. um like, I want to try and help them come up with something that's going to help get them over the hump and help them get noticed. And I think my takeaway from what you told me is just focus on the work, make good music, and the people will hear it.
Well, maybe. I mean, maybe people will hear it, maybe they won't. I think that there's amazing artists that I feel like there's all sorts of amazing artists that people don't hear their stuff. But at the end of the day, like, if you're not, I mean, I think if you're just trying to make money, there's a lot of things you can do that you can make a lot more money on than making music. So at the end of the day, it's like you kind of have to be into it for making the music anyways, or I feel like, what are you really doing um, in this space? I don't know. But that's my opinion on it anyways.
Definitely, and I get it. What I'm saying is, it's less about a concern for money. And what I've noticed is a lot of young and eager artists getting burnt out on the fact that no one is paying attention. Right?
Yeah.
I trust what you're saying in the sense of, you gotta love the work. You gotta make music for you, right? But I've definitely seen a powerful element of the positive reinforcement feedback loop, right? Like, if I make a song and I know it's good, but nobody else does, I feel neutrally about that. If I make a
Yeah.
song and I know it's good and other people think it's good, that fuels the creative engine to want to do it again. And I know that seems very shallow to some, to be motivated by external praise, but I think insecure and new artists maybe need that reinforcement to help them really confirm that this is the career for them.
Yeah, I think that's really true. And I think that um, a part of it is the platform. I'm just thinking here, you're like bringing up some good points, and I'm like making me think a little bit. And I think a lot of it is like the platform that you're using to share the music. So I see a lot of people who make, great music, sharing that music, say on TikTok, and it's not like nobody's like listening to it. Nobody's liking it, nobody's sharing it, nobody's commenting on it. I think it's because it's inherently not a platform that people go to listen to music. Then a lot of times they even have the music turned all the way down, and they're just like watching a few seconds of it, seeing what the subtitles say, and then like flicking up or down. And so I think there's a lot of frustration in that people are trying to use platforms that are not necessarily like built to consume like media, the type of like stuff they're making. And you think about like, okay, well, what platforms really do have organic discovery of music out there um, that are pretty good and that are really about people listening to music, not watching 5 seconds of a video clip. And I think in a ways, like part of that was what was so amazing about like SoundCloud at the time that I was posting on there, is that I feel like that was a place that, what were people doing? They were going there to find like interesting new music that they couldn't hear other places. and kind of dig deep into like new genres and find new artists and things like that. So in essence, it was like the perfect platform for people who wanted to, for people, if you were an artist who were posting music and people didn't already know about you, it's kind of like the perfect platform to do that. I don't really know. I don't think SoundCloud is the same anymore. I don't think there's the same energy there, and they've changed their algorithm a lot to show different types of things to people. So it's not quite as focused on that the way it used to be. But I don't really know many platforms that like are very popular or that people want to put energy into that kind of can serve that purpose. So I think a lot of it is where you're putting yourself out there and where you're posting your music makes a big difference too.
Definitely. I spoke to another lo-fi artist that you may or may not be familiar with, No Gimmicks, who described a golden era of SoundCloud. I think very consistent with what you're describing. There was a time that SoundCloud was it for underground music discovery. I think that they've become very heavily corporatized, and I wish that magic was still there. In my experience, it hasn't been so much, but I'm not here to knock SoundCloud. More just to throw out there that there are other media consumption focused platforms for music like Audius, perhaps Newgrounds. YouTube is still a thing. There's other uh, music posting platforms outside the official distribution networks like Spotify and Apple that I think constitute a good opportunity for up and coming artists to, like you said, experience organic discovery.
Yeah, I think that that's important. It's yeah, because if you're putting a lot of energy trying to be discovered for your music on a platform that's not really about listening to music, that's just going to be a really tough road.
Definitely. If you don't mind, I'm gonna switch gears here. And I heard you mention Tennyson, and I'm familiar with his work, or at least I was familiar with his work. I want to say like 5 6 years ago, and what it seemed to me was like very very experimental jazz inspired trip hop, hip hop, lo-fi, or almost like it to me seemed like the perfect blend of EDM, jazz, and lo-fi. Would you say that Tennyson is an influence of yours, and do you have any other ones that you think are worth shouting out?
Tennyson is a little bit of an influence. I wouldn't say a major influence. It's funny you asked this question. I knew it was coming, just from how you were teeing that up. And I actually the other day I made like a little like a list in my notes app of like influences. So I was just gonna see if I could look it up really quick. Yeah,
Sure.
but like I'd say like the biggest influences I've had, because this is great because I have them all listed here because I sat down for like half hour and thought about this. But here we go. These are my biggest influences: RZA from Wu-Tang Clan, Aphex Twin, Burial, King Tubby, Daft Punk, Jay Dilla, The Orb, Fred again, Titsworth, Tame Impala, Plastic Man, Chord Hell, DJ Screw, Jamie XX, Clams Casino, Brian Eno, Madlib, Flying Lotus, DJ Shadow, Knox or Knowledge or whatever you want to call him, LCD Sound System, Boards of Canada, and Fortet. I would say those guys are that's probably my biggest influences right there.
Honestly, a great list. I heard some bangers in there specifically. You don't hear too many people reference Burial. I mean, yeah, they're like relatively well known for developing the genre of future garage.
Oh, Burial is that. I feel like his album Untrue has aged so well. I mean, it still is amazing to listen to. It still sounds like nobody else, and I honestly think I just think it's such great work, and it's really incredible too. Like you hear about his production process too. I don't know if you know about this, but apparently Untrue was made like in, and I could be like completely wrong here, so I might just be spreading like this unsubstantiated rumor at this point, but like I'm pretty sure you can Google it. But I think it was made in Audacity off with no grid, just like copy pasting like sounds onto like onto like not on the grid, and then like moving them around, then using the effects to pitch up and down, or like the inside effects where you can just like select the range of the audio and then use the effect on it and then merge down or whatever. So it's like the most primitive type of like no DAW type of music setup on the computer you could think of, without even like having a grid behind it to line everything up, which is also amazing.
Definitely, I'm familiar with Audacity, and that is truly the caveman bone axe of audio engineering. It's a crazy concept to think an album was made like that on that program.
I know, and he actually still, he's like he wouldn't even do it any other way. He's like, you have way more control in it. He's like, I can move the samples down to like a sample. I can like, draw in my pitch shift envelope, whatever. He's like, Audacity is the way to go for music production, which I think I could be like, again, like I might be just spreading some like BS here, but I would say Google it if you're interested. I think this is true.
Definitely. I was going to say, I was not surprised, but I guess delighted to hear Brian Eno. I want to say, I think that we've done some blogging for him via the Intelligence website. So it was interesting to see that name come up. I guess my question is, which of these, you gave me quite a laundry list. Who do you think, or which specific artists do you think made the biggest impact in your sound? How did you discover them, and why do you think they had such influence over your music?
I mean, I don't think I could pull it out to a single artist. I don't think I could do that or say this artist is the one that had the biggest influence on my sound or something like that. I mean, there's some artists in here that I think I could talk about different artists on this list and why I think they're amazing or why I think they're really interesting. But all these artists in some way, I've had like every single artist on this list, I had their music on repeat for driving around my car on repeat, probably listen to at least an album from each of these artists, like dozens of times, and just really sunk into it. And so I don't know I can't really say one of them is more than the others. And there's someone I want to put on here that I always try to call out that I think just deserves more love, but is not on my list, but I'm adding to the list right now. But Sleep Dealer. Sleep Dealer was like one of the first lo-fi artists I ever listened to. And kind of like was a big inspiration to me when I started making lo-fi, just as like raw lo-fi beat maker. The album Herba is just lo-fi masterpiece. I love that album. And so I'm adding him to the list. I just put him in my notes app as well.
I'll do some research. You've given me a lot to chew on with these ones. I was going to, honestly, I feel like we went so far down the influences rabbit hole. This is going to seem like a screeching left turn, but I'm curious to know how long have you been making music? Like what is your career span?
Like probably about 15 years.
Would you say there were any developmental landmarks that you can point out during that 15-year period, changes you went through or things you experienced that played a role in what you were creating?
Absolutely. I mean, I talked a little, I'm not counting like I mean, aside from just early kid learning music stuff, I mean, the landmarks or the turning points, I think a big turning point for me was that a big turning point for me was when I started making lo-fi music. I mean, that was a really big turning point right there. And it actually came after I took a break for like a few years. And I was just focusing on my job that I had at the time, which was honestly pretty stressful. And I ended up like feeling like I had a bit of at the end, when I left that job, my nerves were just so shot. Like I felt like, and I don't know if anyone who's listening has experienced that, I guess a form of burnout, you could call it, something like that. But I just felt like really burnout from working, and I felt like my nerves were really shot, and life just seemed to be in the modern world in certain ways, it just seemed like there's so much of our life that has like a lot of anxiety to it in a lot of ways. And that is everything from just, obviously it's work, but it's even like things like, you're constantly getting like notifications like on your phone pinging you, and all these apps that want your attention all the time. And um every new movie, every new this, every new that, everything is kind of just screaming in your face and being like, I want your attention, like give your attention to me. And I was having this at that moment, I was sort of just envisioning in myself, I was like, you know what, like I really want something to listen to on the beat music side of things, because that's just, beat music is kind of what I've always loved. I really want something to listen to that just like doesn't have these demands of me. Like I don't want something that is like trying to get my attention all the time. That's trying to like, um, you know, give me some sort of message, or or have really dramatic like points in the music where it's just trying to suck me in constantly. I want something that like kind of respects like me in this respects me in this place where it's like it's not constantly trying to like steal my attention or like get in my face, right? As like a type of music. And so to me, that feeling was like, I was like, okay, well, I like hip hop music. I like hip hop instrumentals. I don't really want to hear hip hop vocals. And then I was like, okay, well, I was imagining something that just sounded like really distant. I was like, it's almost like hip hop instrumentals, but it's just really far away. And it's really like not demanding of me at all. And I was like, that's kind of like what I want to hear. And so I started just like making music like that, basically. That was, that's really like the essence of it, is it was really trying to be the opposite of what I felt like a lot of just like the world is in terms of what like things want of your attention. Um, and I started making music like that, and again posting it on SoundCloud. And I started hearing other people who are making music. I was like, well, this kind of like sounds really similar to me. Like the feeling of this is really similar. Like what they're like, what this music feels like, and then connecting with those people. And yeah, I mean, that's like when I sort of discovered, I guess at that point, it was like a really early lo-fi scene. It was like some of those first people I found on there were like, HEEM Surf. I don't know if you've heard of him, or, Sleep Dealer was another one. There was like Saito in like Italy, and Okeho. I don't know if you say it that way or if it's OKHO, but it's just like a handful of people. Shaman Rogers, Jax, it's like these early like SoundCloud lo-fi guys. And like, yeah, just started to find other people that I felt like were actually like making music that had a similar feeling to me. And I don't know if they were inspired by a similar motivation or like a similar ideas, but that's what inspired me.
I absolutely love that perspective, right? I think that is the bane of the early artist, is making music that demands and screams for attention in a world where we already have so many other more pressing things demanding and screaming for our attention. This idea, this concept of making music that doesn't ask too much of you sounds like a welcome reprieve, like a way to get away from all that. You honestly have given me a little inspiration for rethinking what I'm attempting to do with my own music. So this has honestly been really enlightening. Because we got a little bit of a late start, I'm going to drive things to a close right here. So I just wanted to wrap up with a couple questions. Do you have any collaborators or people you enjoy working with, people that you have worked with that you want to shout out? And separately from that, if you could put somebody who's listening onto one song or one piece of work of yours, what would it be?
Yeah. So I I really like, who am I working with right now? I mean, we could just start there. Like I just made some songs with a guy named HEEM, who HEEM, which I think he makes kind of just like jazzy stuff, and he programs it all in there. But I just think I just really love his stuff. It's really cool. I made a couple songs with him recently. I have been working with Project Air on a song, which is really exciting for this new project I've been working on. I did a track or two with SwuM recently, which is just incredible because like I've always been such a huge fan of SwuM, and it's cool to make some stuff with him. I had an opportunity to make some tracks recently with Hugwe, which I also am a huge fan of Hugwe and his ambient guitar. Just finished a couple of tracks with Colors in the Dark, which again, like a amazing producer, great influence. But yeah, like I feel like there's so many amazing instrumental musicians making instrumental beat music right now, and I love I love making music with different people. So I just am always kind of like when I hear someone who I really like their music. Sometimes they'll reach out or they'll reach out to me, and it's really just fun to work on music together. I am planning on making hopefully I might be making a little EP here with G Mills, who I've made some music with over the years, but that'd be really fun to make something more with him. But yeah, I mean, I'm hoping to make some more music with Laffy too. But we'll see. I mean, I don't know. It just kind of it comes as it goes,
Right. I know the drill of working with other artists, and it's a handful, but just you seem to be navigating well. This is quite the laundry list of ongoing projects or upcoming projects. You get around, man. I'm impressed. Any final announcements? Any piece of work that you want to turn people on to, or big things coming soon?
Well, I got some releases coming out soon. So I have this album Imperfections 3, which is going to be released really soon, which I'm pretty happy about. It has some collaborations with Kupla on it, HEEM, as I mentioned, SwuM, and Project Air, and probably someone else that I'm forgetting, which I'm sorry if I forgot, but it's hard to remember everything at the moment. That's I think that album's going to be pretty cool. I think one single of it already came out, which is the more housey one. Kind of is like a housey jazzy type song. But I think in general, like the piece of like maybe like one of the beats that I have over time, like really maybe thought was one of my favorite and more interesting is a beat called Good Night. And it's actually a collaboration with my ambient alias. And it's on a album called Dove that I did a few years back. But I really like that song if anyone wants to check that one out. But yeah, I mean, I don't really have any big announcements other than that. There's just a stream of music coming out. I appreciate everyone listening to it. If people are listening to my music or they're artists themselves or they ever want to reach out, people can reach out to me on Instagram or Twitter. Depending on how spammy things get on Twitter, sometimes I turn off my DMs, but most of the time my DMs are on. And if people ever want to reach out and just send me stuff they're working on, like I'm always down to listen to people's music and give them my thoughts on what they're working on, that sort of thing. But yeah, that's all I would say.
Beauty. Thank you for a great interview. It's Cosmo, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Appreciate you being willing to hop on the show, talk to us. I feel like I learned a whole lot. I look forward to speaking with you sometime again. Okay.
Yeah, it was great to meet you, and thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it.
Take it easy and have a good one. Okay.
Bye.